A red sun crept over the horizon, turning the cracked earth of the desert into a vast canvas of ochre and gold. Dust swirled in slow, deliberate eddies as the cool dawn whispered promises of fresh beginnings. In the heart of that scorching land stood Silver Sage Ranch, a remote haven among wind-carved mesas and thorny sagebrush. It was here, amid creaking wooden porches and rusted wagon wheels, that Josie Lee arrived with nothing but a battered suitcase and unyielding determination. Josie had come from a long-forgotten town where the streets were as barren as the hope in its people. Rumors had spread quickly of a cooking job at this ranch, a place little known beyond its windswept boundaries. With a slender frame hardened by years of hardship and a gaze that seemed to burn with both sorrow and defiance, she sought a fresh start. Her dress, once pristine white and now stained by the trials of a turbulent past, fluttered slightly in the gentle morning breeze. Around her neck, a simple gold band, a keepsake from a family that had once cherished her, rested against sun-warmed skin. It was a quiet testament to her resilience. As Josie stepped off the dusty stagecoach that rattled into the ranch's small corral, a group of weathered cowboys eyed her warily. Their spurs jingled in low voices as they whispered among themselves. Skeptical murmurs that she was too delicate or too marked by misfortune to handle the rigors of life on the range. But Josie's eyes remained steady, her heart unbowed. She had learned long ago that strength comes not from brute force, but from a defiant spirit that refuses to be broken. Among the cowboys, one figure lingered at a distance, a man with a hard, thoughtful gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. Harlan, a taciturn cowboy with a quiet reputation for resourcefulness, had been with the ranch for years, yet few knew of him beyond his unassuming presence. Beneath his worn hat and weather-beaten face lay secrets, truths tied intricately to Silver Sage Ranch and to the very land upon which it stood. Though he rarely spoke of the past, his eyes, dark and searching, seemed to follow Josie as she made her way toward the modest cookhouse. In that brief instant, as if an echo of memory stirred, Harlan recognized something in her that whispered of a shared history, a faint, unspoken connection that neither dared to explore. The cookhouse was a humble structure built of sun-bleached logs and corrugated metal, its windows fogged over like the eyes of an old sentinel. Inside, the scent of stale grease and wood smoke mingled with the promise of a new meal. Josie's hands moved deftly as she unpacked her modest cooking utensils from a battered pack, a small set of knives, an iron pot, and a few well-worn recipes scribbled on torn paper. Despite the skeptical glances that followed her every move, she set about preparing a hearty stew to warm the souls of the ranch's hardened men. Each chop of her knife and measured pour of water was an act of quiet defiance, a declaration that she would not be defined by whispers of her past. Outside, the ranch buzzed softly with the everyday murmurs of cowboy life. Horses snorted in their stalls, and the low hum of conversation drifted across the open barn door. A few of the rough-voiced workers paused at the threshold of the cookhouse to watch Josie work. Their eyes, once filled with dismissive assumptions about the fragility of a woman like her, gradually softened as the rich aromas of her stew began to rise. The scent of slow-cooked beef, onions, and wild herbs melded with the crisp morning air and stirred something ancient within them, a longing for authenticity, for nourishment that went beyond the mere filling of an empty stomach. Harlan watched silently from the far side of the yard, leaning against a weathered post worn smooth by countless seasons. His gaze was not vocal, but his dark eyes betrayed an inner calculation, as if he were weighing the worth of this newcomer against a ledger written long ago. That ledger was of secrets and tragedies, a lost love, a crime of passion that chilled his own heart, and a land that had been fought over in bitter silence. He remembered a single earlier encounter, a moment when fate had almost brought him too close to another soul marked by pain. Yet today, as the scent of Josie's cooking began to assert its gentle dominance over the morning, he felt something stir inside, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this woman might be more than a memory, more than some of her scars. As the simmering stew began to crackle softly on the open fire, an uneasy quiet fell over the cookhouse. A gruff voice from outside broke through the stillness, part admonishment, part curiosity. "You sure you can handle our kind of life, miss?" It called from a weathered cowboy leaning against the corrugated metal of the door. Josie paused, lowering her eyes for a moment before looking up steadily. "I can," she replied, her tone measured and clear. "And I intend to do more than just cook. I plan to survive." The words, sparse and resolute, sent a ripple through those gathered. Even the skeptical cowboy's frown softened, if only for a moment. Inside, as Josie stirred the stew, she noticed a note tucked beneath a metal oil can. The faded ink spelled a warning. "Watch for shadows and silver. He owns more than just his word." The mysterious message disturbed her, stirring unease. Its cryptic nature hinted at a secret connection between one of the ranch cowboys and the very land they trod upon, a secret she did not yet know, but one that would soon upend her world. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into the small pocket of her apron, a silent promise to herself to discover its meaning. Throughout the day, Josie worked tirelessly, her every action infused with both care and defiance. By late afternoon, the stew was served, and the cowboys gathered in a rough circle, slurping it with gritty appreciation. Even as rough banter and low laughter filled the air, Josie heard movements beyond the ranch. In the horizon's distance, against the blazing sky, a solitary rider emerged, a figure whose outline was shrouded in a mirage of heat and dust. The rider's approach, sudden and deliberate, sent a shudder through the gathered men. Harlan's eyes flicked from the distant silhouette back to Josie, a flash of warning in his steady gaze. The mystery of the note and the ominous appearance of the rider coalesced into a palpable threat. Whispers in the distance spoke of a man known to own the very land they stood on, a man whose dark secrets had long been buried under layers of greed and betrayal. For reasons that Josie did not yet comprehend, that man might be closer than anyone realized. The wind shifted cruelly as the rider drew nearer, his spurs jangling a staccato beat against the barren ground. The cowboys fell into a wary silence. Josie felt her pulse quicken and her heart tighten. She thought of the note's eerie phrase, silver and shadows, and wondered if it was meant for her or for someone else entirely. Her mind swirled with questions, each more desperate than the last, as the face of the horizon darkened with the rider's looming approach. In that charged moment, when the fading light met the encroaching shadow of mystery, Harlan stepped forward. With deliberate calm, he addressed the gathered men, his voice a quiet declaration of authority. "Keep your eyes open," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon, "and be ready for what may come. We are a family here, and our land will not be taken without a fight." His words, though few, resonated deeply in the still afternoon air, mingling with the smoky remains of the stew's aroma and the whispered suspicions of the ranch. Josie, standing near the cookhouse door, felt both fear and a defiant surge of resolve. The note in her pocket seemed to burn against her skin as she resolved to learn its meaning and confront the secrets it hinted about the man who might be among them, a man who might own the very ground beneath their feet. As the rider's silhouette grew ever larger in the distance and the murmurs of the cowboys faded into an uneasy quiet, Josie took a deep, steadying breath. The day had brought her a new lease on life, and now that promise would be tested. As dusk began its slow descent, painting the desert canvas in hues of ochre and deep indigo, a single, hushed whisper spread among the men, a whispered rumor of a man with silver in his eyes and a heart as guarded as the secrets of this land. Was it merely a tale to scare the uninitiated, or did it hint at the true owner of Silver Sage Ranch? Josie's gaze met Harlan's across the fading light, and in that brief, silent exchange, an unspoken understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that not everything was as it seemed. The stage was set, the mysteries deepened by the ominous note, and the distant rider now a harbinger of the unknown. In that charged twilight, as the wind sighed through the sagging timbers of the homestead, Josie knew that her journey had only just begun, and that the secrets of the land and the one silent cowboy would shape her fate in ways she could scarcely imagine. As the darkening skies merged with whispered rumors of hidden ownership and forgotten crimes, a solitary rider draws ever nearer, threatening to engulf Silver Sage Ranch, and Josie's newfound hope in a tide of dangerous revelations. The rider's spurs glinted like knives in the dying light, carving silence into the dusty twilight of Silver Sage Ranch. As the sound of hooves faded into a hushed murmur, Josie Lee stood at the threshold of the cookhouse, where the scent of simmering stew mingled with the arid tang of sagebrush and cracked earth. In that suspended moment, every whisper wind and every flicker of the rusted lantern on the wall carried secrets of old grudges and new hopes. The cryptic note, "Watch for shadows and silver, he owns more than just his word," remained fresh in Josie's mind, echoing the threat that had first reached her in the fading silhouettes of that lone rider. Inside the humble cookhouse, Josie moved with quiet determination. The room, its worn wooden beams and faded walls telling stories of countless frontier nights, had slowly transformed from a place of skepticism into a sanctuary of warmth and flavor. Earlier that day, despite lingering murmurs among the Cowboys, she had charmed them with her skillful hands and the soulful aroma of her stew. As steam curled upward like whispered prayers, she stirred a pot of hearty beef stew with tender onions, wild herbs, and a fiery kick that belied the soft-spoken resilience that defined her. Each careful movement was an act of rebellion against a past where judgment was as harsh as the desert sun. In a quiet corner near the door, Harlan, an enigmatic, taciturn cowboy with eyes that held more secrets than the endless horizon, observed silently. Though his rugged face betrayed little emotion, there was an unmistakable intensity in his gaze as he watched Josie. He remembered their brief, unspoken encounter long ago, a fleeting moment that revealed him the scars hidden beneath her composed exterior. Yet, even now, no one knew the full truth of that past, nor the dark memories that both he and Josie carried in secret. His silent support had become a steady pillar, his unwavering presence a quiet promise of protection in this unforgiving land. Outside, the sun slipped further behind towering mesas, leaving behind a sky streaked with melted amber and deep violet. The ranch's adobe walls glowed softly in that waning light, and the distant murmur of cattle and clinking spurs began to settle into the rhythm of evening. But amid these quintessential sounds of the frontier, an undercurrent of tension pulsed. The mysterious note in the rider's fading silhouette had sown seeds of uncertainty. Rumors of Josie's past mingled with youthful whispers and gruff remarks from skeptical cowboys, murmurs that questioned whether a woman like her could truly be more than the scars of her history. Yet Josie found solace in her own quiet dignity. In the waning light of the cookhouse, she cleaned her work area with practiced care, her motions methodical and graceful. Every clink of metal against wood, every soft sigh of steam escaping the pot, was a quiet declaration that she would not be defined solely by the cruel judgments of others. With a small set of biscuits and freshly brewed bitter coffee, she began serving the cowboys who gathered reluctantly at the long, rough table beneath the cookhouse's open door. Their eyes, initially narrowed in suspicion, gradually softened as they savored the warmth and flavor of her meals. Even the roughest among them could not help but be touched by the earnest sincerity in her work. During a lull in conversation, as the desert's cool evening air seeped up through the slightly ajar door and mingled with the spicy aroma of her cooking, Josie's thoughts wandered back to the ambiguous note she had discovered. She held it delicately, as though it were a fragile seed of destiny, and wondered about the man described in its cryptic words. "Shadows and silver," she murmured to herself, the phrase echoing like a refrain in the quiet corners of her mind. Contemplating its meaning, she recalled subtle details from her own past. A betrayal by kin, a bitter memory that had almost crushed her spirit. The note hinted that one of the Cowboys may be more than he appeared, a guardian of secrets, perhaps even the true owner of the land upon which they all labored. A chill ran through her, not from the desert cold, but from a stark realization that her journey here might have been fated to intersect with dark legacies. Harlan, leaning against a soot-stained pillar near the door, cleared his throat and spoke in his measured tone. "Miss Lee," he said simply, "your kitchen's warming more than bellies tonight. Word spreading that you got fire in your soul." His words, though few, carried a weight of unspoken understanding that only the lonely and scarred of the West could share. Josie cast him a brief, guarded smile, a silent thank you for quiet kindness, and perhaps with a hint of familiarity in his eyes that suggested he, too, carried burdens of the past. But the moment of fragile peace was abruptly shattered when a distant, echoing sound, a rattling wagon and the hooves of a horse, broke through the hall. From the far end of the ranch property, beyond the scraggly line of desert cacti and wind-carved rocks, a solitary figure rode cautiously toward the homestead. The figure's approach stirred whispers among the gathered cowboys, and some cast wary glances toward the horizon. Harlan's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, and Josie's heart skipped a beat. The note's warning reverberated in her mind. Watch for shadows and silver. He owns more than just his word. As twilight deepened into an indigo gloom, the rider's silhouette loomed against the star-pricked sky. His form was lean and angular, with a glint that might have been silver in his eyes, catching the last vestiges of light as he rode. Josie's thoughts churned with both apprehension and curiosity. Who was this man, and what secret ties did he bear? Her past, already a tapestry of betrayal and heartbreak, now hinted at new chapters waiting to be written. The ranch fell silent as every eye turned toward the approaching figure, and even Harlan's guarded expression betrayed a flicker of concern. A hushed tension filled the air as the solitary rider slowed near the edge of the corral. His gaze swept over the gathered men and finally rested on Josie. In that charged moment, the atmosphere itself seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken histories. Josie's fingers tightened around the gold band at her neck, a keepsake from the family she once knew, a symbol of resilience in the face of unyielding judgment. "I stay, I cook," she whispered, not as a statement of mere existence, but as a vow of defiance against the forces that sought to bury her further. Then, as if in response to her silent challenge, the rider dismounted slowly. His boots stirred up tiny clouds of dust, and for a few lingering seconds his eyes, gleaming with a cold and calculated light, seemed to search for answers in the flickering lantern glow of the cookhouse. Harlan stepped forward slightly, his wary presence urging caution, but Josie's gaze remained fixed on the stranger. The wind swept across the corral, carrying with it the faint sound of distant murmurs, a promise of conflict and the prelude to a storm yet to come. In that moment, as the desert's chill deepened and the first stars timidly emerged in the darkening sky, Josie realized that her arrival at Silver Sage Ranch was only the beginning of a long, uncertain journey. The mysterious note, the wary glances, and the solitary figure now at the ranch's edge all wove into a tapestry of hidden legacies and untold truths. With the echoes of the hired rider's approach still hovering in the air, she knew that to build a new life here, she would first have to confront the past that stirred in the shadows, and the secret that one of these cowboys might be hiding. As night began to claim its rightful place, the subtle sounds of life at the ranch resumed. The steady creak of the old stagecoach, the murmur of voices in low conversation, and even the soft clatter of bandits' paws provided a delicate backdrop to the unfolding mystery. Josie tucked the mysterious note into her apron and, with a glance at Harlan, closed the door behind her. The ember of curiosity in her eyes battled with a simmering resolve, a promise to uncover the truth behind the whispered shame and hidden ownership that lurked in every desolate corner of Silver Sage Ranch. And as the final light of day faded away, leaving the homestead wrapped in a cloak of twilight and uncertainty, the solitary rider's silhouette merged with the shadows, leaving behind a single, haunting question. Who truly holds the dark secret of this land, and what will it cost them all? As the mysterious rider disappears into the encroaching night, and whispers of forbidden legacies echo through the homestead, Josie and Harlan brace themselves for the revelations that will soon shatter their fragile calm. Who is the man with silver in his eyes, and what dark truth is he about to unveil? The rider's silver coin glimmered in the early dawn light as if cast from molten starlight, heralding secrets buried deep in the desert's heart. The coin spun on the edge of memory and menace under a sky streaked with bruised purples and gold, its reflective surface echoing all that was left unsaid since last night's ominous whispers. Outside Silver Sage Ranch, the dust stirred in slow, mesmerizing eddies while a fierce wind whispered along the mesquite and sagebrush. In that charged moment, Every grain of sand spoke of hidden legacies and the threat of a truth too heavy to bear. Inside the cookhouse, Josie Lee stood before a worn iron pot simmering over an open flame. The aroma of her signature chili, earthy, with a hint of smoked paprika and wild herbs, filled the low-ceilinged room. Each stir of the pot was gentle and deliberate, her hand steady despite the lingering tremor in her heart from the night before. The soft clink of utensils and the rhythmic hiss of simmering broth provided a subtle counterpoint to the desert's restless symphony. Yet even amid these quiet, intimate moments, the specter of uncertainty loomed. The cryptic note still burned at the back of her mind, and the memory of the rider's silver eyes had not faded. Outside, the wind was picking up, stirring a murmur of distant thunder and a murk of swirling dust. Suddenly, a piercing gust slammed against the aged wooden door, rattling its splintered frame and setting the cookhouse ablaze with fleeting shadows. Josie paused mid-stir, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face as she felt the cool draft transform into a forceful, relentless storm that whipped the desert. The gust carried with it a bitter tang of metal and dust, a harsh reminder of nature's untamed cruelty. At that precise moment, Harlan, ever watchful and gaunt, with eyes that held too many secrets, rushed in the shelter of the adjoining room. He moved like a wraith through the cookhouse, every step measured yet urgent, as if driven by an inner imperative to shield Josie from mayhem. His weathered hand gripped the worn leather of his revolver holster, though his face betrayed nothing beyond firm resolve. He exchanged a long, troubled look with Josie, one that spoke silently of burdens shared and sins unatoned. "Stay here," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper, his tone both cautionary and comforting. "I'll secure the door." Outside on the porch, the wind cried like a wounded animal. Harlan stepped out, his eyes scanning the horizon where dust swirled turbulently. The relentless gust carried the scent of impending danger, a subtle mixture of desert blaze and rancid betrayal. The cowboys at the ranch, already subdued from earlier labors, fell silent as they watched his form vanish into the storm's fury. Meanwhile, Bandit trotted at his side, ears pricked and nose low, a steady guardian sensing more than what met the eye. As the tempest of wind and sand rattled the fragile homestead, the tumult grew. In the midst of the rising chaos, Tommy, a young ranch hand with earnest, wary eyes, hurried into the cookhouse. "Ma'am, sir, come look," he called softly, pointing toward a patch of ground near the back exit. Josie, her senses heightened by the instability around her, joined Harlan at the door. There, partially buried in the swirling dust, lay a small silver medallion engraved with intricate filigree. Its design, delicate yet unmistakably wrought in a style reminiscent of bygone eras, seemed to pulse with faint, inscrutable light amid the storm. Josie knelt and gently brushed the sand from the medallion's surface. This looks like one of those symbols from a note," she whispered, voice quivering with a mix of wonder and apprehension. Harlan's eyes flickered with a trace of recognition before he cast a steely glance away. The medallion bore an inscription, a barely legible series of curves and letters that spoke of ancient debts and hidden ownership. Its presence here, unearthed by the relentless desert wind, confirmed that the threat was not to be taken lightly. Inside the cookhouse, while the dust storm howled outside and the ranch's timbers groaned in unrest, tense silence reigned for a moment long enough to be measured by a heartbeat. Vance, a surly cowboy known for feeding malicious rumors, had been seen earlier whispering into the ears of others, his tone venomous. Though his words had barely been audible, the dissonance they sowed was palpable. Rumors of Josie's tainted past, of betrayal and dishonor. In that mute chamber of flickering light and encroaching darkness, every sound was amplified. The metallic scraping of the medallion against the wooden floor, the soft rustle of fabric as Josie tucked into her apron, and even the measured, heavy footsteps of Harlan returning from outside with news. Harlan's face, shadowed and pensive, closed in as he gathered with Tommy. "There's more," he said, voice grave. "I saw tracks leading up from where the medallion was found. Tracks that don't belong to any regular rider." His eyes betrayed a hidden turmoil, as if that revelation was tied to something deeper, something in his own past that he wished to keep locked away. Josie looked from Harlan to the medallion, the gold band around her wrist glinting under the lantern's dim light, a silent testament of the defiance that had brought her here. "I never meant to stir up more trouble," she murmured, the weight of her past mingling with the present crisis. "But if my history is a key, then I must see it through." The tension in the room was broken only by the low murmur of the wind and persistent creaking of the aging homestead's bones. Bandit paced restlessly near the door, his eyes alert to every shifting shadow. As the storm began to subside into a heavy, oppressive silence, a new sound emerged, a deliberate, measured crunch of boots along the gravel path. The medallion's discovery and the tracks Harlan had found promised that their adversaries were drawing near. Before any further words could be exchanged, the door burst open with a force that sent sparks flickering from the wood. In stepped a stranger, a man with a hardened gaze and a lean, angular face that reflected both defiance and danger. His dark eyes caught the light briefly, revealing a glimmer of silver that seemed to confirm every whispered rumor. "You," he said, his voice low and menacing, directing his words at Harlan with a subtle intensity. "I know what you've tried to hide." For a long, suspended heartbeat, the room filled with a heavy stillness that seemed to swallow all hope. Josie's breath hitched, and Harlan's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The stranger's arrival and his pointed words set in motion a chain of revelations that would soon dismantle the fragile calm of Silver Sage Ranch. As the stranger's eyes locked with Harlan's, the medallion slipped from Josie's grasp, clattering softly on the creaking floor. The sound echoed like a death knell, and as the stranger advanced, the tension in the cookhouse soared to an unbearable peak. Bandit barked once, sharply, a final warning before the confrontation. In that charged moment, the room teetered on the precipice of a violent explosion of secrets and betrayals. With the stranger's stride growing more ominous by the second, Harlan stepped forward, his expression a complex tapestry of resolve and haunted regret. As the stranger's silver eyes fix on Harlan and the medallion lies forgotten on the floor, the weight of hidden pasts and dark secrets hangs heavy. What truth does the stranger seek? And how far will the reckoning of our legacy push Harlan and Josie into the heart of an impending storm? Harlan's secret bled through the stranger's silver gaze as the wind howled across the burning embers of the desert dawn. The endless mesas stood like silent sentinels under a sky heavy with promise and peril, and in the dim light the cookhouse at Silver Sage Ranch trembled with uncertainty. Inside, Josie Lee moved quietly behind a counter worn by years of hardship, fumbling with a piece of parchment, while the clamor of whispered rumors still echoed in the background. The notes of a melancholic harmonica drifted faintly through the open window. Outside, Vance's scornful voice and the uncertain steps of a lone rider had left the ranch in a state of alert, their unsettling presence lingering like a curse. In the hush of that charged moment, Josie carefully retrieved the silver medallion she had found earlier, a small, circular token now resting in her trembling palm. Its intricate inscription, etched in delicate curves and filigree, shone beneath the flicker of the cookhouse lantern. As she studied the medallion, a chill ran down her spine, as though the artifact were a mirror reflecting a hidden truth of betrayal that had long haunted her fragile existence. That truth, so deeply intertwined with her own scars, now began to reveal hints of a connection to Harlan's guilt, a connection that threatened to shatter the precarious trust between them. The medallion's inscription, faint but unmistakable, formed a crest resembling a ram's head entwined with a single, narrow sword. Josie's mind raced with fragmented memories of her past, a sordid tale of betrayal in a dusty saloon where loyalties had been broken and innocence sold. Her jaw tightened as she recalled the cruel whisper of a voice accusing her of dishonor, all while the glimmering gold band around her wrist silently testified to her resilience. "I never wanted to bring shame upon myself," she murmured to the empty room, her tone both defiant and sorrowful. "Yet these symbols, they tell me the truth is more complicated." At that moment, Harlan stepped into the doorway, his rugged face etched with lines of regret and quiet determination. The quiet click of his worn boots against the creaking wooden floor punctuated the silence as he regarded Josie with somber eyes. "You deserve to know," he said slowly, his voice low and burdened. "I've carried a secret for too long, one that haunts me every dawn." His words, sparse and measured like the desert wind, filled the space between them with an uneasy intimacy. Josie's gaze met his, and for the first time she saw in him a glimpse of truth behind his stoic facade. "What secret, Harlan?" she whispered, her tone laced with both hope and trepidation. Harlan paused, the flickering light catching the weariness in his eyes. "I am not but a lowly cowboy," he began haltingly, as if tasting each word before release. "I am the rightful heir to Silver Sage Ranch. I swallowed my pride and hid my name from these lands after betrayal at the old saloon. I failed you once, and I have carried that failure with me ever since." His confession, quiet and tormented, resonated deeply with the lines of pain that marked Josie's own turbulent past. For a long, heavy moment, the only sounds were the murmur of the wind and the distant, persistent clatter of spurs on worn earth. Josie's heart pounded in the silence as she processed his words. Her eyes drifted involuntarily to the gold band that adorned her wrist, a keepsake from a time when hope was still a tender bloom amid a stifling gloom. You're the owner?" she managed, voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to fully accept the reality of his confession. Harlan nodded grimly, sadness intermingling with relief in his gaze. "I am, and I've guarded this land with my very soul, though it was never truly my place to hide." His voice, heavy with remorse and the burden of legacy, filled the room with the weight of unspoken history. Outside, the wind seemed to pick up once more, as though echoing the turbulent emotions swirling within the cookhouse. Before either could process further, Tommy, the young ranch hand who had loyally helped clean up after the previous unrest, burst through the door, breathless and alarmed. "Ma'am, sir," he gasped, his eyes wide with urgency. "There are more tracks near the northern fence. Footprints that are fresh, and I think they're coming." His voice trembled as he clutched a bundle of torn fabric bearing a fragment of the twisted, our emblem, the same mark that had dogged Josie's past. Vance's venomous rumors still echoed in the recesses of the ranch's corridors, and now they mingled with the tangible threat that Tommy's frantic report heralded. Josie felt her pulse quicken and the rough paper in her hand. The note she had found seemed to vibrate with ominous intent. "They're coming for us," she declared, her tone both determined and fearful. "If they know I'm here, if they know I'm real, then I have to face them." Harlan's face tightened, a deep sigh escaping him. "We knew this day would come," he said, voice barely rising above the rustling of the homestead's wind-blown timbers. "I've tried to protect you, Josie, but now they threaten to tear apart the only life we have built here." His admission, laden with the weight of past sorrows and betrayal, struck Josie like a cold gust on a stifling day. Bandit, ever vigilant, barked once sharply, stirring the lingering tension like a clarion call that demanded action. Harlan moved toward the door with measured speed, ready to meet the threat. As he slid the door open just a crack, the desert outside revealed a narrow band of fresh footprints leading toward a rugged northern fence. A dark shape shifted in the glare of the rising sun, an unmistakable sign that someone malicious, driven by old grudges or newfound profiteering, was closing in. Josie's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. The revelation of Harlan's secret had fractured her sense of security, yet his confession lent a depth of honesty that tugged at her resilient spirit. The gold band on her wrist pulsed like an echo from a past that sounded both bitter and beautiful. "I don't know if I can fully trust you, Harlan," she said quietly, voice thick with uncertainty. "But I want to learn the truth, even if it means facing the shadows of my past." His eyes met hers, dark with regret and unspoken pleadings for understanding. "I failed you once, and I carry that stain every day," Harlan replied, his tone raw as desert stone. "But I would sooner face the world's wrath to make amends than let you suffer alone." His words, heartfelt yet laced with the burden of his hidden lineage, hung in the humid air, as potent as the desert's bitter breeze. A sudden gust shook the door as the first clear footfall of an approaching rider thundered along the gravel underfoot. Bandit barked furiously, and the distant sound of horses' hooves spurred Harlan into motion. "Stay here," he ordered firmly to Josie. With one last conflicted glance, he stepped out into the glare of a fierce, unyielding sun and the uncertain promise of confrontation. Josie watched him go, her heart heavy as she clutched the gold band. It was a symbol of defiance, of survival through pain, yet now it also shimmered with uncertainty in the light. The wind through the cracked adobe seemed a murmur of secrets and betrayals. As she lingered in the cool interior, the door ajar behind Harlan, and the threat of an unknown adversary closing in, her resolve crystallized like a desert mirage. As Harlan steps into burning light to face the incoming rider, and Josie is left behind with the echoes of his confession and the weight of her newfound doubt, what will come the secret that binds them? Will Josie stay and trust Harlan, or will the threat force her to escape the ghosts of past? The rider's hooves echoed like thunder in the blood-red dawn, shattering the fragile piece of Silver Sage Ranch. In the early light, the desolate expanse of sagebrush and low mesas seemed to tremble beneath the weight of ancient secrets. Inside the cookhouse, the air was heavy with the aroma of savory stew and freshly baked cornbread, the tangible promise of a new beginning for Josie Lee. Yet outside, along the ragged perimeter of the homestead, the approaching rider heralded a threat that would force every buried truth into the open. Josie stood at the wide adobe door, her gaze fixed on the dark silhouette advancing to the swirling dust. Her eyes, lined with determination and tempered by pain, flickered with a memory of bitter rumors and whispered betrayals. The gold band on her wrist, once a mere keepsake of lost family and past injustice, now shone like a beacon of resistance against those who had once tried to shatter her spirit. In that moment, she resolved to claim not only her place at the ranch, but also the truth entwined with every dusty secret of this land. Inside, Harlan emerged from the cool shadows of the homestead's corridor. His face, once stony and unreadable, now bore the lines of a man burdened by confession and remorse. The earlier revelation of his hidden heirship, the truth that he was a rightful owner's son, had strained the delicate trust between him and Josie. Yet now, as the rider's spurs clinked on the worn earth beyond, Harlan's eyes hardened with resolve. He knew that the coming confrontation would force him to face the very ghosts of his past, ghosts that had cost him dearly. Stepping out onto the weathered porch, Harlan's boots stirred a cloud of dust as he scanned the horizon. The rider, emerging from the long shadows of the desert, dismounted slowly. His dark eyes glinted with chill intensity that caught the first rays of the rising sun, and in the light, a crude emblem, a twisted R entwined with barbed wire, was visible on his worn leather vest. The emblem, a bitter reminder of the corrupt faction that had once spread vicious rumors about Josie's past and sought to claim the very land beneath their feet, sent a shiver down Harlan's spine. "Who are you?" Harlan demanded in a low, measured tone that conveyed both challenge and sorrow. The rider's gaze shifted, and he spoke with a voice as cold as the desert night. "I'm here to reclaim what is rightfully mine. The medallion you found, the note you hold, it all confirms a debt owed to the reckoner. I represent those who say this land is stolen." His words cut through the chill morning air like a sharpened blade, and behind him, the distant low rumble of murmured conspiracies could almost be heard. Inside the cookhouse, Josie watched from a half-open window, her heart hammering with uncertainty. Earlier, as she had pored over the silver medallion's inscription, a ram's head entwined with a narrow sword, a hidden map had begun to reveal itself, pointing unequivocally to a long-forgotten ledger detailing the land dispute that had once torn her world apart. That ledger, combined with a cryptic note hinting, "Watch for shadows in silver," he owns more than his word, now wove a bitter tapestry linking her saloon betrayal to Harlan's secret guilt. It was as though fate had set her on this path to reclaim a stolen identity. At that moment, Harlan advanced, meeting the rider eye to eye. "The land you speak of is ours by right, not by claims born of treachery," Harlan said, his voice resonating with the quiet strength of one who has borne the burdens of the past. The rider's eyes narrowed. Your silence makes you complicit. His arm made a swift motion, drawing a pistol from beneath his vest. Harlan's hand moved just as quickly, his own revolver raised in a steady, controlled challenge. The desert seemed to hold its breath while the two men locked eyes. For a heartbeat, silence reigned in the space between gunfire and the low whistle of the wind. Then, with a crack that split the tense air, shots rang out. The rider fired first, but Harlan's aim was true. His shot found its mark, and a pained cry escaped the attacker as he staggered back. In that chaos, Tommy, the earnest ranch hand whose loyalty had been a quiet anchor in these troubled times, raced from the cookhouse, gathering several cowboys who had long watched the disputes with wary vehemence. Vance, whose malicious rumors once sought to isolate Josie, now stood among them, his face pale and uncertain. Inside the cookhouse, Josie's breath caught as she hurried to the door. The confrontation outside was a blur of gun smoke, shouted accusations, and the frantic clatter of boots on hard, dusty ground. Bandit barked furiously, darting between legs and nudging an overturned oil can that spilled a few defiant droplets on the threshold. Josie's eyes lingered on the gold band on her wrist as she felt both fear and determination surge through her. Every part of her soul screamed that this was no ordinary land dispute. It was a bursting open of a wound that had long festered between her past and the present. Harlan turned toward Josie, his face streaked with sweat and etched with sorrow. "Josie," he said softly amid the continuing turmoil, "listen to me. I never meant to hurt you with my secret. I buried my shame in silence, hoping to start anew. This land, this ranch, it is our chance to make things right." His eyes, heavy with guilt, locked with hers, pleading for understanding even as his actions betrayed the conflict of his own heart. Josie paused, torn between the tumult of emotions and the raw truth in Harlan's confession. The angry, desperate shouts from outside receded in her ears, replaced by the gentle murmur of the wind and the steady heartbeat of a woman who had seen too much in her past. "You always are behind your silence," she murmured, voice full of both hurt and cautious hope. "I carried my pain into these kitchens, defined in every meal I cooked, because I refused to be defined by that betrayal. But now I need to know. Can I trust you with the truth of your past, even if it means reliving mine?" Before Harlan could answer, the fight outside reached a frenzied peak. The rider, now clearly identified as a land claimant from a rival faction, the Reckoner's emissary, as the emblem on his vest suggested, sustained a deep wound and fell to one knee. His eyes, glistening with a mix of anger and desperation, met Harlan's. "This medallion and this land are promised to those who right past wrongs," he croaked. "You stole from us." His words, heavy with unrepentant bitterness, resonated with a long shadow of collateral guilt. In that desperate moment, Tommy stepped forward, rallying the gathered cowboys with steady, impassioned plea. "We stand together," he shouted, his youthful voice galvanizing those who had long been divided by suspicion. Vance, his earlier malice now transformed by fear and uncertainty, slunk silently away. The ranch, battered by the sound of gunfire, became a call to redemption and reckoning. Harlan's own eyes glistened with unshed tears as he finally spoke, voice thick with remorse. "I took a life that night, a crime born of despair I can never undo. I wore that silence like a shroud, hoping to atone for my sins. Today, I stand before you as the heir of this land, but without my redemption, I am nothing." Josie stepped forward, her voice rising above the chaos in a clear, determined tone, "And I will not be defined by the sins of others." Clutching the gold band, she produced it for all to see, a symbol of her enduring spirit and a silent challenge to the lingering judgments of a cruel past. The medallion, now a relic of the ruined claim, glinted in the early light as though offering forgotten records of betrayal. Its crest, a ram's head and sword, merged Josie's personal scars with Harlan's dark admission, binding their fates in the crucible of shared penance. As the rider's emaciated form was dragged away by the resolute Cowboys and the threat of the rival faction began to dissipate, the storm of conflict slowly eased. The echoes of gunfire dwindled, and in the heavy silence that followed, a somber calm settled over Silver Sage Ranch. Harlan approached Josie again, his eyes searching hers with raw vulnerability. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the weight of his confession clear in each word. "I failed that night, and I have spent every day since trying to make peace with it." Josie's gaze did not falter. In the quiet that enveloped them, punctuated only by the soft clatter of bandits' paws on the dusty floor, she replied, "We both carry our pasts like scars, but maybe together we can heal, turning our pain into strength." Her voice, gentle and unwavering, was a promise of hope amidst the remnants of a bitter legacy. In a final act of symbolic defiance, Josie and Harlan convened with Tommy and the other Cowboys in the fading light. Together, they gathered the shattered fragments of the R emblem, burning them in a communal bonfire by the ranch's battered barn. As the flames devoured the symbols of betrayal, the medallion secrets were laid bare in the faces of those who had gathered. Proof of fraud, a record of stolen deeds, and a testament to the cost of greed. The day waned into twilight, the desert sky a canvas of deep indigo and soft gold. Josie prepared a final meal, a hearty stew and warm cornbread, that filled the cookhouse with a comforting aroma of home. Surrounded by the rugged family she had forged from distrust and suspicion, she gazed at the gold band on her wrist and Harlan's resolute face, feeling the uncertain ghost of yesterday finally dissolve into the promise of tomorrow. In a reflective epilogue beneath a sky littered with stars, Silver Sage Ranch stood reborn amid the scars of its past. Josie and Harlan, bound by shared guilt and hard-won redemption, began to rebuild their lives together. The rebellious gold band and the unveiled medallion had become symbols not of shame, but of unyielding hope, a future where justice and compassion reigned over bitter judgment. As the gentle murmur of a harmonica and the peaceful clink of coffee cups filled the cool night air, a quiet strength emerged from the ruins. Josie, now secure in her new family and home, whispered into the twilight, "I'm staying. We're building a place of truth." Harlan's soft reply, "You're enough," resonated like a promise. And so, beneath the vast, forgiving sky, as the desert wind carried away the last echo of divided pasts, they set forth on a new chapter, one of resilience, redemption, and the promise of a hopeful dawn.